Trump's lawyers called this a civil dispute. This morning on Morning in America rebuked the idea that this is a criminal issue under the Presidential Records Act. Tom, do you want to handle that?
Sure, I'll take a swing at that. Look, I mean, certainly you can resolve some of these disputes civilly, but at this point, given where we are right now, given what's happened, given the evidence and given the indictment, it is a criminal dispute. To me, the charges, at least what we're hearing the reports on in the indictment, seem to be playing out along the lines of what we anticipated with the charge under the Espionage Act, some obstruction-related charges and the like. So far, the media reports appear to indicate that this indictment tracks the evidence and the arguments and the testimony that the special counsel has been gathering for several months now.
Misty, it's my understanding this case is less about classified or declassified documents. Instead, it's about the national defense information. Talk a little bit about that and the Espionage Act and how that plays into this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Espionage Act relates to the retention of these documents that have military information. So there's going to be several factors. And we've seen this statute come into play in the last decade. Think Snowden, think Julian Assange, WikiLeaks. So what this is going to be based on is Donald Trump retained documents that he knew were classified that relate to these military secrets. There's going to be several aspects to it. First of all, the retention of those documents. And second of all, the accessibility of those documents to others. Reports have indicated, and of course we won't know the factual assertions till we actually see the indictment, that these records were not in a place that was out of the area where people were traversing, that they were not really locked in a secure room. So all of that is going to be part of what we see playing out with respect to the Espionage Act relating to the retention of the documents themselves rather than what happened after the fact, which speaks to the obstruction and false statements charges.
And then you've got the intent. So, Tom, what about deniability in a case like this?
Yeah, well, in most cases, I think what you would do, at least with regard to the obstruction charges, is that as a defense lawyer, you would basically say, look, we did our best to cooperate. We were trying to be forthcoming. You know, maybe we inadvertently missed some documents, but we certainly had no criminal intent to obstruct. That could be tough. Again, based on the reports that we've gotten, the testimony that we've heard, the special counsel has elicited before the grand jury, they've really been making an effort to try to prove that the former president knew what he was doing, that there was an intent to obstruct, that he knew he didn't have a right to keep these documents, that he knew he did not automatically declassify these documents when he left the office, and that he worked with others, including his lawyers, to thwart and obstruct and prevent the Justice Department from finding out what documents he still held in his possession and getting them back.
Misty, Trump will appear in court, according to him, on Tuesday. What will happen at that time?
So what we're going to see is formal charges. Hopefully we'll have that will be when the indictment is publicly released. We'll know the factual assertions. He will go into court. He will be booked like anybody else. He will have a photograph taken, fingerprints, everything that you would expect to happen with any criminal defendant. He will go in. I anticipate he will plead not guilty. He will likely be released, and there'll be some talk of what's to come next, a preliminary hearing where they will go through some scheduling issues. And because this is an unprecedented case, I would expect to hear that there's going to be a lot of pre-trial motion practice. There's going to be a lot of challenges to these charges. So hopefully on Tuesday, we will have more insight to what the factual basis of these charges are, and that indictment will be unsealed.
Right, the details remain under seal. How soon might we hear or see what's inside these documents, what evidence attorneys have, Tom?
I think we'll hear pretty soon. And look, I think it will also be very interesting to see the special counsel's decision in terms of how much factual information and evidence he puts in the indictment. Sometimes you'll see prosecutors file fairly, bare bones indictment. The criminal complaint, might just have kind of a very high level 30,000-foot overview of what went on. I suspect this case may be a little different. The special counsel obviously knows the attention of the nation, the attention of the world is on this. He's been gathering a lot of evidence. So I suspect we'll actually see a fairly robust, meaty indictment that contains a lot of evidence, a lot of the factual material that he's collected so far.
How about the logistics of this on Tuesday, Misty? It wasn't long ago that we were following Trump in New York as he was being indicted in Manhattan. There was a question about whether there would be cameras inside that indictment. There were still photographers that captured the moment. What can we expect next week?
Well, federal court in general, no cameras in the courtroom, so I would not expect that we'll actually see what happens. But reports indicate that this was a surprise to many. So now there's a scramble to ensure safety, all sorts of protocols relating to entry of the courthouse. Remember, Donald Trump has Secret Service protection for the rest of his life. So there's going to be a lot of coordinated efforts as far as just the logistical implications of having a former president who's a front-runner candidate appearing in federal court for the purposes of putting in that not guilty plea. So we're going to see a lot of movement around coordination with the courthouse, the Secret Service, local law enforcement, much like we saw in New York City a couple months ago.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.